Someday my prince will come. Someday will be forget.
Hello and welcome to the second ever episode of Auditory Odyssey, your one-stop shop for all things music talk, from death metal to Disney and blast beats to ballads. We've got you covered. I'm your host, Brennan Bulver. On today's episode, we're going to take a deep analysis of Take My Death Away. It is a Halloween musical by Stephen and Teresa Gashler, performed at the Angelus Theater in Spanish Fork, Utah. The musical has become somewhat of a marquee event. It is now on its 6th consecutive year. It's a story about two engaged lovers, David and Sadie, who are torn apart when David dies suddenly before their wedding. David's spirit refuses to accept his fate and then becomes determined to find a way back to the living so that he can reunite with Sadie and claim the life that they were planning together. In his afterlife, David meets Eve, a more experienced spirit who becomes his guide and ally, and together they search for a path that will allow David to cross back into mortality. Through this, they have to navigate different rules and tricks and the strange comedy and peril of the spirit world. Meanwhile, Sadie struggles with grief and the pull of life continuing on without David, and a living character named Isaac, a young doctor who Sadie works under. He tries to help her process the loss and move forward, which creates an emotional tension for David as he races to return to Sadie before she's claimed by someone else. The musical blends some spine-tingling atmosphere with dark comedy, romance, and moments of wonder. The plot balances suspense and horror as David's quest confronts the limits of love, the rules of death, and the sacrifices required to bring somebody home. Diving into the music, the song that you heard at the beginning is called The Man on the Hill, and it's a little short opening motif that introduces this character known as the Man on the Hill. And it establishes the eerie, otherworldly atmosphere that runs through Take My Death Away. It appears as the first track on the show's original cast soundtrack, and sort of serves as a signpost so that the audience will recognize when the character, or his theme at least, returns. The Man on the Hill is, he kind of functions less as like a fully realized protagonist, and more of like he's a foreshadowing force whose existence underscores the musical's theme of longing and danger, and the porous border between life and death. His voice in the show's musical fragments is sort of seductive and ominous, and sort of beckoning to like kind of draw more vulnerable characters towards the boundary between worlds. Lyrics explicitly frame him as the figure who calls people through the night, promising transcendence while leaving their listener unsure whether he's an emissary of heaven or hell. His recurring motif kind of signals his presence whenever the narrative skirts the supernatural, and it anchors the audience's recognition and signaling escalating threat and temptation each time it reappears. Moving on to another piece that I really enjoyed from the show was called Shackles, and in Shackles the song kind of compresses mortality into everyday moments, pairing blunt, image-driven lines like "Wake up dead" with more wry observations about confronting denial. Musically, it rides on a persistent clock-like pulse that softens for domestic scenes and cuts hard on sudden death images, so the song's emotional engine is contrast. And I'd like to just play a little excerpt from the song just so you can kind of get what I mean by like a clock-like pulse that it has. So here that is.
Every moment time is a ticking, going by and by. Any moment falling and slipping, hit your head and die.
Now, some of you may have noticed in that section there that she says that every moment time is a ticking. And that line right there starts to really highlight this reoccurring motif in the entire show of how fleeting time is. And that's just one example of some really great composition skills in this musical. and it really allows for the music to tell the story more than just being like a series of vignettes. Another song in the musical that I think deserves a lot of attention is called Restless Immortals. And Restless Immortals is a mournful ensemble ballad that's sung by multiple spirits that are trapped between worlds. And it kind of voices their jealousy and their anger and their aching and longing to return to life after such a cruel separation. The lyrics really paint the dead as broken, ostracized figures who watch the living with hate and bitter nostalgia while pleading for their chance to transcend their entrapment. And I'll play a clip of that song here for you.
We're restless immortals awaiting our fate.
We look at the living with jealousy and hate.
We're bound to the earth, for we fail to transcend.
We long to return to our lives once again.
So the song is kind of like a mournful minor key ensemble ballad that layers close-knit harmonies and sparse atmospheric accompaniment to sort of mirror the lyrics' haunting resignation. It makes you sort of sympathize with these spirits and kind of feel sorry for them in being departed but not gone. Another piece in the show called Old Daniel, it's sort of a mournful story-driven ballad that kind of tells of the cautionary tale of the legend of Old Daniel, who was a phantom fiddler whose lonely music lures or warns foolish mortals and wandering spirits about the price of meddling with the dead. Daniel was shot dead in his sleep, and in his afterlife he makes vengeance towards the man who murdered him his goal. The song Old Daniel is sort of a nod to the man on the hill and emphasizes the point that the man on the hill is probably Old Daniel out to seek his revenge. Now, I'll play a little clip from Old Daniel for you here.
Till he discovered a way to come back. He entered his body a mere sack of bones.
And struggled to walk to his murderer's home.
The door was unlocked and pushed with a grin.
And searched the hallways and bedrooms within.
So that it's sort of a fun one, and it's told from more of a third-person perspective as they kind of narrate you on the story of Old Daniel. It's not Old Daniel himself telling the story. It's a group of the town telling the story of Old Daniel. It's a really fun way of telling the story. Now, the song Old Daniel leads into another song called A New Life, and A New Life sort of functions as the musical's emotional lighthouse. Like, it reorients the story from loss and consequence towards the possibility that the character may be able to choose a different fate. And it really humanizes the stakes and gives the audience a compassionate, believable reason to root for the protagonist's return to life and love. A New Life is a hopeful, emotional, resonant ballad that takes yearning for a second chance and the possibility of transforming after loss. The song frames the protagonist's longing for redemption and connection while rising from quiet reflection into a determined, tender resolve that underscores the musical's theme of love, rebirth, and risk. The song treats rebirth not as a miracle, but as a hard-won possibility that requires honesty and risk. This is probably one of my favorite songs from the musical because it's really rooted in a lot of heavy, grounded emotion. This song is a prime example of how music can really drive emotion in the listeners. And we'll play a little clip from it right here.
You must go, and I must remain.
There's a new life waiting for me, waiting for you. A curtain is falling, a destiny calling, a glorious view. There are no ends, you've proved there's always a way. A burning within you, a fight to continue, a conquered grave.
Like I said, this song really serves as like a grounding point or a turning point in the musical that shows that moving on is an option in life. I really feel like this song in particular delivers one of the heaviest messages in all of the musical. Sometimes as humans we tend to get stuck in periods of mourning and we fail to see the opportunities that await us ahead. Now, moving on to a lighter note, a sort of fun song in the musical is called Falling Apart. And Falling Apart it's a rueful solo that's sung by David as he's literally and emotionally unraveling as his death-tinged symptoms start to creep in on him. The lyrics mix physical decay, like temperature dropping and pulse slowing, with his romantic confusion as the singer pleads between his two loves, confessing guilt towards Eve while yearning for Sadie and insisting that they're meant for the light rather than for the grave. And musically, it sits between plaintive folk and theatrical lament. The song sort of balances humor and pity as David grapples with fading vitality and his stubborn desire for life and love. This song happens as David's spirit is reunited with his body after working for a while with Eve to gain the ability to return to the mortal world. I'll play a clip from this song here.
My temperature's dropping, my pulse slowing down. My elbows are creaking, my eyes are glazing over, and I'm trying to please both the girls in my mind. But everything's breaking, I just need more time. Oh, Eve, did I hurt you? I know this is hard.
So you'll notice these playful nods as he kind of mentions how his body is literally falling apart, but also that it kind of leans into these emotional states where his soul is actually kind of falling apart because he's found this new person, Eve, and he's kind of separated himself from Eve so that he can get back with his old fiancée. This song sort of climaxes David's internal battle of trying to move on or trying to return. And that's kind of the theme of the entire musical is David trying to move on or is he trying to go back? And throughout this song he's sort of dancing with himself, struggling to dance with himself in this internal battle after reuniting with his body and losing contact with Eve. Now, later in the show, David is kind of met with an ultimatum of having to offer his own soul to spare Sadie, and they perform a number called The Sacrifice. And in this number, the lyrics, they kind of balance a bitter acceptance with fierce resolve, and then turning the bargain more into like a moral crucible and an act of tragic devotion. The music really heightens the tension with some dark sustained harmonies and a heartbreaking melodic plea that makes the listener feel the cost of salvation and the permanence of the choice. It also really heightens the motive of Daniel, who is the antagonist of the show, and draws a really clean picture of him. Here's a little clip from that song.
So let your spirit go, escape your suffering. Why bother fighting and denying obvious reality?
You planned for my demise.
You knew that all along. Why wait another hour? There's no good reason to prolong.
So during this number, you can really feel the betrayal that David feels when Daniel takes his life from him, takes his soul from him, to be more precise. And Daniel really expresses his gratitude in finally getting the vengeance that he sought towards the man who took his life from him. So shortly after this number, we revisit A New Life, which was the number that sort of laid out the protagonist's arc and his history of loss, the argument for change, and the swell of possible renewal. And we come to a new number that's called A New Life, the Reprise. And the reprise kind of strips that arc into a single potent moment of decision and affirmation. Musically, it recalls the principal melody, but trims ornament and harmonic complexity, trading the original expansive build for intimacy and focus. The arrangement usually pairs back to a handful of instruments or a single voice, so the words land with greater clarity. And dramatically, the reprise either reassures the audience that the character is committing to change or reframes the promise with new knowledge, making the hope feel more fragile and defiant. In performance, the reprise carries more weight per line. Familiar material becomes like a litmus test for whether the character has actually moved forward, and its brevity turns into an emotional hinge that redirects the scene towards consequence rather than exposition. The reprise still carries the same heavy emotions as A New Life, but it redirects those emotions to an actual conclusion. The final number of the show is called Stop Hiding Your Face, and it's a tender, plaintive ballad in which Sadie pleads with David to return, or at least to stop concealing himself from her. And the lyrics kind of move between an aching longing and determined self restraint, as she admits temptation to follow, yet resolves to let go for her beloved's sake, turning private sorrow into a plea that's both intimate and quietly heroic. She subtly accepts David's death and her need to move on from the situation for her own happiness and for his happiness, as she knows his spirit will never be able to rest with her unease. And here's a little clip from that final number.
Please stop hiding your face from me. Illusion and mystery out of my control. You've gone without me. I know I must let go. Longing to follow, but trapped in a hole. What will become of my forsaken soul?
The song is it's a really beautiful duet that they do there, and it's a great way to really resolve the story and put an end to both of their tragedies, as they've both been struggling to find each other. Take My Death Away serves as a compact, emotional, rigorous piece that marries Appalachian Gothic atmosphere with intimate human stakes. The songs move fluidly between folklore and confession, using spare, folk-rooted textures to let character and lyric carry the dramatic weight. The musical strengths are its moral clarity and emotional honesty. Bargains with death, the ache of longing, the possibility of redemption are never abstract ideas, but lived choices for characters the audience can feel beside. With an ear for small, meaningful gestures, the show leaves listeners unsettled in the best way, awake to consequences, and quietly hopeful that change remains possible. Thank you for listening to Auditory Odyssey. Tonight's deep dive into Take My Death Away was made richer by the work of local artists and the community theaters that bring these songs to life. If this episode moved you, do one simple thing. Support the Angelus Theater in Spanish Fork. Buy a ticket. Bring a friend. Volunteer. Local arts need more than applause. They need audiences and small donations to keep productions bold and alive. Follow the Angelus Theater on their social media, sign up for their mailing list, and consider sponsoring a seat or underwriting a show if you can. Subscribe to Auditory Odyssey so you never miss an episode, and leave a rating to help others find us, and tell one person about a performance you loved this week. I'm Brennan. Thanks for listening, and for keeping community theater sounding loud and true. Peace out.